One of the best things we ever got for our RV was our propane fire ring. Sure, we like a wood fire as much as the next folks, but these guys are easy to start and keep lit. They're clean and never a bother to neighbors. It's become one of our must-haves when we're packing for a trip. But it's always been a little bit of a concern to us that these portable fire rings are so low to the ground, and with no buffer around them, they tend to be a hazard for little kids and pets. Well, with that in mind, and a little time on my hands because, well, COVID, I started kicking around in the garage the other day, and bam, I came up with this table that our fire ring fits into. It solves the height problem and the buffer issue. In addition to those features, it gives us a place to put our feet and our drinks. I am so proud of my little project that I thought I'd show you how you can make one of these for yourself for right around $100 and just a couple days in the shop. To be sure, I built this one for well under that because I salvaged some wood we had laying around. 18 years ago, we built bunk beds for the boys, and 8 years ago, we took them apart and stowed the wood in the garage. Well, fast forward, turns out that wood was perfect for this project. Since you probably don't have disassembled bunk beds lying around, I'm going to use Redwood for the demo project. I just happen to think Redwood is gorgeous and it's pretty lightweight, so it'll make it easier to schlep in and out of the truck and the storage locker. Here's my materials list. Some redwood 2x4s, ripped to 2x3s, some redwood tongue and groove planks, a slab of plywood or OSB as substrate for the tabletop, some wood screws and plugs, brackets, finishing nails, painter's tape, wood putty, glue, and whatever sealer or stain you'd like. While this isn't what I'd call a difficult project, it will definitely help if you're handy and you have some woodworking tools. Some sort of power saw, such as a circular and or sliding miter saw, will definitely make short work of all the cuts we'll be making. A jigsaw, I used a router for the tabletop edges, but sanding could work also. An orbital sander, tape measure, an assortment of clamps, a large carpenter's square, 3-foot straight edge, a drill driver with assorted drill and screw bits, a finishing hammer or nail gun that shoots 1-inch brads. Having made our run to the local home store, I'm ready to jump in. We'll measure and make some cuts to get things rolling. I've included the cut list in the notes below. This table will be about 14 inches tall and the tabletop will be about 28 inches square. It could be easily taller and or bigger if that's your taste and you don't mind spending a couple bucks more on materials. Once the cuts are made, I'll put the tongue and groove off to the side and I'm going to sand all the 2x3s. First with some coarse 60 grit so I can make all the edges nice and soft. I just think that will give it a nicer look. When you have the look you want, go back over all the surfaces with a fine 220 grit paper. That's going to give it a smooth finish when you put the stain or sealer on. Cuts made and 2x3s sanded. Next we'll laminate the boards that will be the legs. Again, this is personal preference. I went with the laminated 2x3s because I think 4x4s would be just too much for this little table, and single 2x3s wouldn't be enough. So the laminated 2x3s I think are just right and give the project a nice handmade look. The tops of the rails for the fire ring are going to be installed at 5 inches from the bottom. I'm strategically placing the screws so they'll be hidden when we assemble the frame. So I don't have to mess as much with changing bits when I'm assembling the frame. I'm going to take a minute to pre-drill the countersink holes for the screws. On the 25-inch boards, I'm putting the screws 2.5 inches from the end and about 1.25 inches down, about centered. On all the rest, I'll put the screws 3/4 of an inch from the end and about 1.25 inches down, again about centered. Okay, now let's do some assembly. I'll take 2 legs and attach the top 22-inch rail. The ends of these rails will be flush with the outside of the legs. Drill 7/64 pilot holes for the number 8 wood screws, being careful not to drill too deep, and power the screws in. Be sure to orient the legs so the laminating screws will be on the inside of the frame. Repeat for the other 2 legs and the other 22-inch rail. Continue with the 25-inch rails. The ends of these rails will be flush with the outside of the 22-inch rails. Okay, the frame is starting to take shape. It should look something like this. Now we'll attach the bottom 19-inch rails. I'll lay the frame on its side with one of the 22-inch rails on the table and use painter's tape to mark the height of the rails at 5 inches. I'm using the tape so I don't have to deal with removing a pencil line later on. I took some measurements off my fire ring to come up with the 5 inches. That should work for an 11 or 12-inch tall unit, but you may want to tailor this specifically to whatever unit you have. I'm putting the 17-inch rails in place for this step, so I'm sure to get the 19-inch rails in just the right position. This is where a helper or some clamps might come in handy. Drill the pilot holes and power in the wood screws and repeat for the other 17-inch rail. The 19-inch rails are already in place, so drill those pilot holes and power in the wood screws and the frame is built. Finally, pop those plugs into all the countersink holes. Tap them in with a finishing hammer. And you might put a little dab of glue in there just to make them permanent. So, good work. Absolutely. Go ahead and savor it for a minute. I'd be lying though if I said we were almost done. This is actually where the fun begins. But great time to pour yourself your favorite beverage. For me, that's a nice chocolate stout. I'm going to put this aside for now, and tomorrow we'll tackle the tabletop finishing and final assembly. Day 2, before we roll, I have to report my first injury. Don't worry, I didn't cut my finger with a power saw. I didn't drill a hole in my hand. I nicked my head on the handle of the tripod that holds the video camera. Okay, confession's over. The frame dimensions are 25 by 25, so that's what I made the substrate. I recommend having this cut at the home store where you buy the wood. Cuts are easy for them, and generally the charges are minimal. I'm going with the substrate design because that'll make attaching and sawing the Redwood tongue and groove easier. Now let's find the center of the substrate by laying our straight edge corner to corner one way and then the other. X marks the spot. Now drill a hole through the center mark and use some sort of compass to mark a 10-inch radius circle on both sides. There's a number of ways to do this, but I used a scrap piece of metal punch flat bar to do mine. I'm scribing the circle on both sides because we'll use one to lay out the tongue and groove on one side, and then we'll eventually use the circle on the other side to cut our hole for the fire ring to go through. Now draw a corner to corner line and use that to rough out the layout for the tongue and groove. I'm building from the center out and making sure my calculations were correct so I can end up with a 28-inch table. Once I've confirmed the layout, I'll attach the 13-inch center pieces with a little glue and some finishing nails. The 32-inch pieces, one on each side of the 13-inch pieces, will be attached next. I'll countersink the nails and fill the holes with putty as I go. Proceed with the 22-inch pieces and finally the 12-inch pieces. I'm blue taping the approximate circle and outside border on this side to minimize splintering when I make the cuts from the other side. I'll flip over the tabletop, lay down blue tape, and mark the outside border of the table, using a straight edge to guide the jigsaw and cutting the tabletop to size. Now blue tape the circle on that side, re-scribe the circle, and cut out the hole for the fire ring to drop through. This is freehand, so go slow and carefully. Mistakes here will be hard to fix with sandpaper. This is where you can take a minute to admire your work. We're definitely getting close now. I'm using a 3/8 inch quarter round router bit now to finish the edges. This is an aesthetic call, and you can certainly put your own twist on this part depending on your tool set and skill set. Next, I'm sanding the tabletop with a 220 grit paper to get the surface ready for finishing. So, check us out. We're looking really good here. Some of you might decide at this point you're ready to attach the tabletop to the frame and be done. That could work. For me though, I'm going to apply a coat of transparent sealer. It should give the wood a little more resistance to the elements, and it'll really make this grain pop. I'm going to do the tabletop and the frame separately. Should be easier that way. Once that sealer coat's applied, yeah, you better believe I'm going to admire my work for a few minutes. We're so close. But walk away for a couple hours and let that dry. When the sealer is dry, flip it over and attach the tabletop with those L brackets. Flip it back over, and look what we made. Last things last, I'm taking mine to the RV patio. I'm going to put the fire ring in and fire it up. Not only is our patio a safer place, it's a much prettier place as well. This was a super fun project, and one that will bring us enjoyment for many years to come. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and feel free to leave your comments below. We'd love to hear what you think of our videos.